Good afternoon and welcome to our Digital Methods School fall session. My name is Ivan Grek and I'm the director of the Russia program at the George Washington University, where we brought together a consortium of digital research labs and teams to create and develop a knowledge commons dedicated to new methods to study Russia and semi-closed societies in general. So, our goal is to develop methods to address inaccessibility of fieldwork in Russia and equip scholars without technical expertise to use some, as we hope, cutting-edge tools and technology for conducting social, political, linguistic research in humanities, and other disciplines. So we created the Russia program in 2022 in response to the Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine. So that moment was exogenous shock for all of us, and it raised multiple questions of what do we do with Russian studies in general. We lost connections, we lost access to the fieldwork, we lost correspondence with colleagues, we lost our previous methodological comfort, access to empirics. So everything has collapsed in the ways we had to do things before 2022. And perhaps at that moment, we painfully realized that our attempts to understand Russia had proven, let's call them insufficient, or even sometimes useless. So I bet we all remember the general approach to um, the possibility of the invasion back then. But unlike in 1992, when the whole world of Soviet studies has collapsed, right, and it produced a way of intellectual revolution back then. February 2022 led to something different. It didn't simply produce an attempt to recreate something, right? It actually brought us to a dilemma what to do with the Russian studies in general, right? So, on the one hand, Russian studies needed decentralization, clearly. On the other hand, we needed greater granularity for understanding Russia, as we needed to study the Russian Federation itself in far more details to understand its society, microdynamics, its value structure, because we simply, to February 2022, simply demonstrated us that we didn't grasp some, uh, core reactions, attitudes of the leadership of the society. And so Russian studies, paradoxically, in 2022 became more necessary from my perspective, from our perspective, than at any time since the collapse of the USSR. And yet, the question was brutal. How do you study a country that you cannot access? Fieldwork became nearly impossible. Political elites became opaque, grassroots developments became invisible, and Russia, turned into a kind of research darkness, a space that we could not penetrate. And when researchers cannot access the field, they tend to search under the streetlight, right? Well, not only researchers, that's what all of us is doing. They work with few sources that remain visible, official statements, limited surveys, read Telegram channels, independent press that is available. But as the old metaphor goes, you cannot find your lost keys if you search only under the streetlight, because the darkness remains around you. So this is where data became not simply a tool, but a necessity in a sense. So data allows us to look beyond the streetlights. It allows us to detect patterns our human perception alone just simply cannot grasp due to the vast scope of information out there. And oh boy, Russia is quite an open country when it comes to data. Decades of digitalization have created such a paramount of sources that we'll have things to study even if all gets closed down tomorrow. And we'll have data to study for years to come. And social trends are not something that one can reverse like with closing a telegram. If we have something before that, we still can project, we still can assume, we still can do analysis. Meanwhile, I would also mention that all those attempts to bring the new form of digital governance to Russia, it all leaves the tracks and stands that we can analyze. So in these sessions, you would learn plenty of new sources that hopefully will really enrich your approach and attitude and will help you to rethink on how you can tackle the research questions that you have. But while our eyes usually focus on what is being politically significant, repression, war, mobilization, when we look at data, we see that it really reveals some unexpected trends. So, for example, as an anecdote, at the time when we assumed that everyone was discussing war in their kitchens, we may discover statistically significant spikes in conversations about vegetable pickling during the fall season. And that's, paradoxically is what often societies do care about. So, but what does it mean when you have those awkward spikes of data? Does it mean that people don't care? Maybe they're afraid, or they're psychologically adapting to the reality, or maybe they're just simply complying to propaganda. Data alone cannot answer these questions, and because it only reveals the patterns. And interpretation requires theory, social science, history, and all the knowledge that we, here I'm addressing myself as a person without technical background, we're cherishing and developing throughout our pre-2022 careers or studies. And basically, here quantitative signals must always be paired with our insights and our understanding how the society works from our qualitative experience or previous reads, you name it. So statistical anomalies also can be interpreted through cultural knowledge, literature, history, right? That's not all about social science. In our research, we combine data-driven analysis to get those points of importance. And then we try to find the ways to interpret them. So, as in the case of this Russians' attitudes to the war that were analyzed with digital methods, qualitative methods, you name it, there were plenty of publications out there, right? We found out that, at least on our part, that those awkward attitudes to the war that, from one perspective, were about trying to dismiss it or reject or approve, combined with this, as you've mentioned in sociology, always differentiating opinions to whether there shall be a truth or a peace agreement or continue the war. We just found out that there was a mechanism of what is now called normalization, right? So people consumed narratives that helped them to adopt to their reality without necessarily deeply believing in them. And that's how it goes. And that's how other topics come in. And that's how those awkward anomalies that we found got their answer. And what is interesting, while we're doing this qualitative analysis, our colleagues from PS Labs were doing qualitative works and interviews, and they had the very same findings, right? And when we have some data interpretation, usually using social theory, and qualitative research having the very same answer to the question, that's probably where we can say that our method and approach really worked. Because still, data is not an ultimate solution. This is a tool. And this is a tool that we try to deliver to people who do not necessarily specialize in digital means and methods per se. However, I shall note from the very beginning, we'll have complicated stuff with people who are advanced in digital research as well. So we'll try to balance it in each lecture and workshop. So we have complicated questions, and we drive our research from the questions that comes from social sciences and humanities, and then try to find data tools and solutions to answer them. That's what really makes us very different from major projects that are looking at data first and at availability of data and asks questions related to those sources that they have. And for example, when we're interested in political attitudes of Russians, will Russians directly answer politically sensitive questions? Of course not. Organizations like Chronicles that are doing social research use sophisticated sociological techniques with indirect questionings, framing devices to capture attitudes more accurately. But even these approaches have their own limits. If we want to do the data study, can we scrape Telegram and just read it or do some basic analytical tool, use some basic analytical tools to see word clouds or whatever can help us to understand the attitudes? Yes, but then we're working on a very specific communicative subgroups, but we're interested in society at large, of course. So we asked, where can we get some help? And here the social theory comes and the theory of uh, consumption of values compass, right? This is a sociological theory when you can associate political attitudes with consumption or other forms of values in there. And in semi-closed societies like Russia, uh, Iran, China, they maintain consumer markets, and marketing research continues. And surveys about products are not banned, and they don't trigger political self-censorship in the same way as political questionnaires. And if we have a theory of values or compass of values, then patterns of consumption can reveal underlying attitudes. So now let's imagine the amount of data that we have to analyze that. Plenty, plenty, right? So we can use surveys that ask the questions, do Russians buy olive oil less or more, and why? And do they like it? Do they like the change of oil that they have? Do they prefer Chinese cars or European cars? What are their attitudes towards digital platforms? And whom they trust more, government or digital platforms, in resolving their everyday problems? And actually, the answer to the last one is that digital platforms have twice as much trust than the government in Russia right now. So those, you see, we can have creative approach to try to answer our complicated questions, and then try to find data to do that. And once again, this is something about personal creativity of a researcher to understand what can help to answer this specific question with this specific framework, right? But here, and what I'm trying will be expressing in this introduction, creative digital thinking is what we all should try to apply to ourselves. And our goal here is to make it technologically possible. So we had multiple great studies completed with people without technical background saying, hey, I have this idea. Is it even technically possible? Right? So we picked research assistants from junior data scientists to answer, to help to navigate those technical aspects. And then when AI started to help us greatly to look for sources and methods and draft some coding, it's just really accelerated the process of creative thinking, right? Because digital methods became more accessible. And once again, that's the very goal of our program, to make these toolkits accessible and ask for your questions so we can understand better what we can develop to make your life easier and your research more impactful. So the part, well, I'll address more the part with how you can think about approaching your research in the following section of my presentation. I'll just make some snapshots of our approaches to different studies. But before that, I would address the question of toolkit in general. So this space is one of the few where you will consistently hear that AI is great. We shall apply it, we shall study it, it shall appear in this study. You can use it to edit your texts, right? We're very AI welcome. Uh, we would need to explore how to use it more efficiently, uh, more ethically at some points, right? But this is a process of experimenting, and we are here for experiment, to experiment on many things. So we would have no restrictions on using AI in any shape or form. And I hope you would appreciate how how much of a help it can be in developing your methodology. And just generally, I would say that that's what I usually refer to. But it's difficult for me to say, the generational gap in our today's meeting. But here I would, you know, encourage you to refer to the generation that firstly witnessed those small calculators that appeared on everyone's tables, right? When I'm asking people of that generation, what did your parents tell you when they seen that you start calculating on paper? They said that everyone will get dumb in 5 years because they're using that machine. AI is a calculator. That's not a god. It will not give you the answers. It's just a machine that helps you to calculate faster. And we approach it this way. And that's why you will hear a lot about it. It will appear in our toolkit and we'll further advance it in efficient way so you can use it without making much of mistakes, but there will be mistakes for sure, and that's not a problem. So in future lectures that we'll have, we'll speak a lot about linguistic analysis and what we can make out of that. How can we research administrative data, sociological data, using tools that are AI driven, old good classical math models and computational linguistics, and some innovative approaches that mixes all together to approach the texts. um, we will provide you with a number of tools that we developed, we as a consortium of labs. And this will involve something that, for instance, I'll show you today, tools that are perfect. That's, because you just need to press the button to get the results without doing any coding or whatever. And a number of tools that would need some basic manual copy paste kind of work with a notebook, right? So not much of a coding, but a way to extract information from the databases that we collected. So there would be a mixture of both with very specific tutorials. So whenever you would want to repeat it, you can go on our website, click on YouTube video, and just do it step by step if you have never encountered these kind of tools and methods. We really hope that your ongoing studies and research might benefit from what we would offer. And in our workshops, you will have an opportunity to ask specific questions and get some contributions to your personal studies. And at the end of the session, which will be April 16th, we'll have the last class on April 16th. We'll just give a broad call to submit your papers or thoughts or reflections, which, in combination with your participation, would facilitate you us to giving you a certificate for completion of the first um, training session that we offer. So yeah, just in general on the toolkit, many different things to study many different topics. And at the end, if it can contribute to your research and you can submit us a short paper, we'll also be happy to publish it if it's ready to be published. Or even if you have a reflection that you would like to submit to us so we can make an evaluation of your participation, that would be great, right? And we'll be happy to review it. So we'll have Q&A after I'm done with presenting some basic things today. So now I'll switch to wait a second. I'm switching to my presentation now. Hmm. So it doesn't allow me to share the screen. Let me try to do it once again. Okay, can you see it now? Yeah. So let me try to run it. Okay, it seems that everyone works now. So one of the greatest achievements in our program, the digital matryoshka tool that we try to find a concept for what we do in terms of Russian studies and digital methods in there. So if you see our logo, that is actual logo right now. That's an allusion to digital matryoshka because and someone once upon a time mistakenly took it for a penguin. I'm speaking for our major logo that you've probably seen on the invitation uh, to this workshop. So today I just want to show you multiple snapshots taken from multiple studies that we've done across many fields to give you a sense how you can approach data and in answering your research topics. So, okay, so first part, metadata and computational linguistics. So what can we do with that? Quite a while ago, at a seminar at Coruscant, which is the Russia program Europe, it's our close friends and colleagues at Paris State University. We had a task for our in-person training. So we downloaded all the reposts of media of each other and asked participants to use Gephi, the old good visualization tool, to show the connections between all of them. So right now, actually, you can just upload it to ChatGPT and it will do it for you. You just literally don't need much things to do. But back then, it was not yet the point. So as you see here on the screen, we have all major media related to the Russian space that have been reposted, and we used the thing that is called clusterization, right? It's when the algorithm puts entities together. When you visualize it, it colors them for an unknown reason. So the reason will be our interpretation. Right, so in here we can see how media are reposting each other in Russia. So you hear this blue bubble on the right part of the screen, which, as you can see from the titles, is the Radio Liberty Free Europe consortium, and you see how heavily they recite each other, right? So you can see a very tight hemisphere which is matched, as is evident, right? So that's how a consortium, media consortium works, and this is a great media strategy to get on the top of the news, to get in reposts, and that's people like Prigozhin was using similar strategy. So his media empire grew quickly because what they've done was that each part of it was reposting another part, right? And that's how they did this rise out there. So somewhere in the middle, we see things like Medusa that is reposting everyone, right? So trying to be objective here. And uh, we see in green Western sources primarily, and in yellow, what we can say Russian inside media, right? Very different sources. TASS.ru, RIA.ru, which are government affiliated sources, but then we have other sources like Fontanka and Forbes that act uh, within the Russian space, right? But without being clearly government media resources. So you see in this picture, we have multiple clusters, which the algorithm has analyzed. And this is how you can visualize and work with big data. Whatever question you have, you can get this type of a picture in there. It can be connections between people. So I've done once a research with a biography. that mentions a great number of people who were somehow connected to each other and just wanted to make sense of it. I just fed it to an artificial intelligence chat. I forgot which one was that. Doesn't really matter there here. Um, got the number of mentions of those people together in relations, uploaded it, and just got a scheme, right? So I could visualize who is related to whom, right? It was not publishable, of course, because for this matter, you need a better methodological tool behind it. But for a personal understanding of relations, that was great. And now it needs zero technical skills to achieve that. So let me go further. So here's another thing of cluster analysis. We analyzed right-wing Telegram channels and focusing on two major groups. So one that we've called one was Voincore and another one that we called right-wing civil society. So those supporters of the war not complying with the government. Uh, so what we've done, we've downloaded all the posts from their Telegram channels and did the very same thing, clusterization, to see what do they speak about, what's their core linguistic and discursive tool, and to try to understand how we analyze it, how can we analyze it. So here, when we speak about that right-wing, non-state affiliated support to the war and to the front, and basically you see that in purple we have the general right-wing agenda here, in green the summary of combat actions, in blue summary of media news, and in orange their fundraising attempts. So when you see the words here, русский народ, православная церковь, русский язык, so very right with language typical terminology. So when we go to Vaincore, we can see a different kind of clusterization and relation of terms and languages in there, with orange being brief descriptions and calls for the nation. So look, Vainglory were collecting money, and it was somehow at the center of their activity in the end of the day. While these guys, who were kind of more sincere in their attitudes, were speaking about ideology way more. While Vainglory always had kind of a links to fundraising campaigns. And then we started to look at fundraising, right? And here you see the language that they used. So we can see a clear distinction between русский and российский between the two. So those right-wingers are using русский, военкоры, российский, which is an old debate out there on the usage and mobilization that comes from it. And I'm now blinking when we were updating the data for this one. But you can see that Vainglory have collected by that time $13 million. So once again, we just scraped all the Telegram channels, and our key search was request for funding and whether it was completed or not. Right, so it's not quite accurate because we don't know whether they reported all the complete fundraising campaigns, and there was no way to get into those details. However, when you have $13 million completed versus less than a million, you can see who is more effective in money making in all of that. So another way to use clusterization and tools of language analysis is our attempt to reinvent what we call criminology 2.0, right? So we're always interested what's going on in Kremlin's elites, how they change, if they change at all. But we have so few information to do that. So in 2022, the Russian government has created a Special Military Operation Commission, which was a uh, multi-agency commission to coordinate uh, affairs related to the war effort, Russia's war efforts. So at the end of each meeting, Prime Minister Mishustin was releasing a statement which was, 5 pages with general conversations that they had, and also with people who attended those meetings. When you read them, you kind of see the agenda, but it doesn't really strike you. However, once you apply my linguistic analysis to it and start clusterizing all those topics, you start to see, by date, what was important out there, by number of mentionings of this specific topic within the meetings, and what has been resolved over time and what has not. So here, for example, we see medical and social support, right, to soldiers, times of mobilization. It's right here, right? So it's very acute. Then we have another portion when Russian troops were in trouble after Kherson. Uh, then we see the problem of coordination that was permanent. And what is interesting, that's the problem of coordination has always been as tight as infrastructure and construction and support to the military complex in general. So we also can see the people who are attending each meeting, so we can do the scoring and understand and try to assume uh, which person was in charge of specific issue out there. And we also can see that the dendrogram of clusterization, which shows how those topics are related to each other. So, as the result of this analysis, we published a paper which explained retrospectively, though, I shall admit it, how Belousov, who worked in Mishustin's office, replaced Shoigu as the head of the Ministry of Defense because his specific skill set corresponded to the problems that we see here and we see in the meetings. I mean, if we would be able to predict it ahead of time, that probably would be another space now. But once again, we've done it retrospectively and tried to use our criminology to zero methodological model to understand how things in the government might work. So here is another very simple frequency analysis. So we downloaded bulk media of Russian press. There, all the federal sources. We had about probably 35 million of publications in this data set, and everything from Kremlin Room, and try to see how the fascism and Nazism narrative, without regards to Ukraine, uh, was working in Russian public sphere up to 2022. So, and when we all were focusing on Nazism and fascism, that was from when we were looked at the streetlight, was overwhelming the public sphere. Actually, and each time when you have a World War II anniversary or another major celebration, the number of mentionings of the topics of fascism and narrative just, skyrocketed, as is evident. So, and for Russians back then in 2022, the number of that mentions of fascism and narrative and Nazism-related narratives was more than kind of usual, but not overwhelming. Not overwhelming. And this was one of the parts of the papers where we looked at what were Russians actually hearing uh, throughout their everyday life. So administrative data is another big source to answer questions. So now try to answer to yourself how many NGOs are there in Russia? Just a guesstimate number or anything you can think about it. I hope you get the estimate now. And I think it was far from what is being registered there, far below, I assume. So when we look at administrative data, we see that there are almost 800,000 nonprofits registered, which also includes, village cooperatives, different form of semi-government engagement with society. many relevant things. However, at least 100,000, 300, 130,000 socially oriented NGOs are there, and the socially oriented NGO is a special determination which you need to deserve. So to get a status of Songo, it's quite complicated in Russia because you experience way more benefits from the government. So those people are dedicated, they do work, and they have quite a decent structure behind them if they could acquire such a status. So an average number of full-time employees, actually by now it's even closer to a half a million. So this is the data from a year and a half ago, with volunteers almost counting at 4 million. And last year, the government issued presidential grants in the amount of 20 billion rubles and legal entities, meaning business, in 91 billion rubles. So once again, that's not quite what we tentatively expect to hear about of what's going on in Russia in terms of its social society structures, not social society per se. And foreign agents and desirable organization laws targeted approximately 1% of the non-profit sector in general. So when we look at this raw data and try to think about Russian civil society, we can make some first simple conclusions. Those organizations were political that were banned, had this very special niche, and they were important. They were kind of, their impact was more than 1%, of course. However, it's highly likely that Russians did not notice because civil society is also about helping, mm, helping, pensioners, animals, working with, I don't know. So what was one of those examples that uh, from the growing sectors? Environment was critical. So environmental work uh, just has a great growth in Russia. And kind of, everyday mundane problems that the government cannot resolve and where those social nonprofits are coming in to work on social policy. So that's what Russians do see every day out there. And those organizations are there, they grow, and as our paper argues, they do the outsourcing of social policies help so the government outsources social policy problems to them. And that's what the major value that they deliver in Russian society now, being non-political. This is a way to look at the civil society using administrative data. So, what do Russian soldiers do with their money? A question that many of people have been interested throughout the time. So, one of our papers argues that there is a great correlation between uh, mortgage debt and the number of soldiers being killed from specific regions, right? So, there is this BBC Media Zona data set, and we have open data on that. If you merge them, you will see that the more people from a specific region were killed, so which means we assume that a lot of people were drafted from this specific region, of course. It really correlates with the mortgage debt perfectly. So they were using it to improve their living conditions, right? Very neat, quite simple in a um, uh, technical way study that answers the question that so many of us had. So, Global South and Russian Arctics. There is plenty of open source administrative data that shows how investors from the Global South, or BRICS Plus, are present in Russian Arctic. So they register their companies there, they register their branches, they do compete with each other, and this is all available data that you can use to analyze the developments in the Arctic region. Military. So that was one of those experimental designs, right? So what's going on with the Russian military and military production? So we've done a very simple thing. It actually was experiment. It doesn't. It will not. It will not work. This experiment was great at that specific point, but then when we tried to publish it and discuss it with military experts. It appeared that it will not work. But our idea was to scrape headhunting platforms to see how the military producers are hiring people in there. Then it appeared that they, stopped doing that online and were using their back channels to recruit people in there. However, it worked for a while, right? And we've seen multiple interesting correlations in there. So once again, we just scrape the website and get those pages with the vacancies posted and analyze them by group and by specific producer. And then we found out that if you remember the story when the Russian S-300s were bombed in Crimea, then producers related to production of missiles started to hire the entire teams, and we've seen that spikes here uh, and multiple others. However, once again, that was a methodology interesting and successful in one single moment, and it doesn't work much now. So we'll come to this one in more detail. I will just summarize things by now. So basically, you see there are plenty of data, plenty of tools that can answer so many different questions. And I would just literally was throwing snapshots at you to try to encourage think creatively about how to approach your studies and your questions with the support of all that data world that we're trying to expose. So this specific tool, which were very shy and decided to use the title that doesn't imply much of how cool we are. We just call it "How Does Putin Think?" or it's called Putin's Head, also in our internal language. So the idea was plain and simple. Putin has been speaking for so long and has so many speeches published. Why wouldn't we try to analyze them using computational linguistics and try to understand how he connects terms and specific concepts in his public speech? And we decided to try it out. So we took all the speeches from all the time without much cleaning them and just created the first chart with using Gephi, the very same tool. And you see, we accidentally got something similar to the shape of a head. That's how the project actually was born. Within head, it was just a random thing. Uh, and the interesting thing that we found out here was that I'm trying to zoom in, but it does not allow me to do that. So probably you will have to trust me on that. Let me try to do it once again. Oh no. So here we go. So we started to look at some key nodes in his thinking. And what we see, Russia, United States, and economic growth. And everything that is clustered gray is related to international relations, which means that Putin has been determining international relations through the US all the time. And the domestic affairs through Russia itself. And economic growth was also a very important thing that structured domestic development. So, and only here in red, which here appears as a neck, it is not. It's just a visual accident, right? It doesn't mean that his head holds in this neck. We see more a kind of a, nationalistic language that he has been using, which is minor to his overall profile. But once again, this is overview over the time. So based on that, we decided to create a tool for convenient analysis of such things. So you can go on our website and see our Putin's Head interface. So here, with our partners from our consortium, Rubase, we're working on creating a data set of Putin's expressions only. So once again, that's what Rubase was doing. They were not just getting the full transcripts of speeches from Kremlin-Rub because they had other comments, other people in, but specifically cleaned up. So there is only things that Putin has expressed himself over all the time of his reign as a president. And based on that, we created an analytical interface. So this how I hope all the tools in the end of the day would look like. So you would not need coding, just clicking the buttons. So basically, the idea here is that you can pick a term, time range or a year, and see how this term has been pronounced over the time according to the strength of relations to other words that are coming next to it. Also, you can see the number of speeches in general. So by count or by share. So incomplete data because we have Medvedev here, right? So over these years, and Putin did not speak as much. And you can use it for just general analysis. And also, uh, you would be able to download those speeches and data sets with his speeches from our website if you would want to work with them in Excel or CVS files or just simply read them, which what many people need. If you're already somehow sophisticated in working with such tools, we have a 3D model out here for better visualization, but you would need to have some previous experience and tools to make it work well for you. So I've been arguing for a long time that the term state in Russian conservative political language is not equal to the state as we understand it in Western political language, because it simply has nothing to do with administration. The state has metaphysical role in political thought and public speech, while terms as power, governance like правительство, they do bear these administrative functions. I've been studying Russian liberal civil society for quite a while, and for the first time encountered the problem when I tried to, when I was interviewing people in Russia, I was asking, look, civil society must protect citizens from the encroachment of the state. And I always got a reply that uh, this is simply not, sorry, I just lost the track. And I was always getting a reply that no, that's a suicide. Civil society cannot resist the state because the state is what cherishes the society, what makes it grow, and so on. And then they started to specify that civil society must resist the state power of власть, or правительство, right? And it was nearly 8 years ago when I started to write about it and arguing that in Russian conservative thinking, civil society supports the state not as the Kremlin, but as that metaphysical big entity. And Putin's victory is that he associated himself with the state. So when it was purely qualitative argument, and before we had a chance to see how Putin expressed it in his speeches. So if we'll go to one of those time periods, you can see that state is here. The next closest, so you can see the approximation of terms right here. The next closest term is Russia. Then we have страна. Then we have Russian as российский, number, society, whole. We have human, attitude, interests. We have other states mentioned in here. And I can just, scroll down, go and try to analyze it by year, looking at, for instance, specifically 2024, when we have states, single, Russian, Russia, attitude, allied, taking sides, interests. There would be zero words related to governance. Independent. So you see that the state does not govern anything. It's just holding out some awkward social function of being something that secures everyone around. However, if we would check the word power as власть, we would see that it is regional, it has organs, it has interactions at different levels of the state. Cool, that's probably going to the Ukraine narrative here. So Kiev is always about state power and власть, so not something legitimate. So you see, when he speaks about Russia and государство, that's faithful metaphysical entity. Kiev is always власть, it's never государство. It also has state, but it has government and work. It's actually do work and take sites and uh, uses other terms that are related primarily to um, governance, right? And it appears, it's you see, it's federal, it has activities, it's corresponding to something, pays attention, has a representative, executive related to business, right? So, and here you can see this clear, how it's clear, this distinguished quantitatively that state as государство in Russian has this metaphysical value and is less related to, to administrating things. And that the people is always are always referring to the state in these historical terms, while the actual problems are coming from state power, which can be changing. So in 1990s, when 90s, when Russian right-wing civil groups were trying to achieve their successes, they were not fighting the state; they were fighting the state power, right? And it was a great distinction. So, and this thing will appear in my book. I'm just now working on getting into my introduction as a proof of qualitative approach with some quantitative take on that. So you can use this tool for multiple purposes and check out the different terms. So term future was also interesting because if you would look at future, say in let's take 2018, it was quite future, Russia. So once again, we have automatic transliterations and translations out there. So please be careful with that because sometimes with terms like strana inside, it just it's a simple mistake that we'll fix, and I just caught it. Human, world, depend, determine, direct, close. If you would look at it more historically, you would see that future is about economic growth, development, hopes, results, and some other things that are kind of not very romantic, let's put them like this. However, after 2024, we see that future is related to young men. It's opening new things to come. It supplies, provides. Future games are not related to what is it related. Um, but my general argument would be that if you try to play with this thing and check how the narrative after the full-scale invasion has changed, you would see that his vision of the future became more romantic, right? It's less about economic development, right? It's more about world multipolar games and importancy and young people. And I believe that in some years he also mentioned spirit and spiritual achievements as an important part of the future.